Discussion with possible direction related to the proposed Town of Fountain Hills fiscal year 2017-18 budget, including all proposed revenues, expenditures, and programs for all government funds.
Mayor,
Ready?
roll call.
Oh, roll call. Oh, yeah, got that.
Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Vice Mayor Magazine is not here yet. Councilmember DePorter.
Here.
Councilmember Yates.
Present.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Tolis. Here. And Councilmember Leger.
Let's just give a few more things. And now Grady.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Council, and the public that's here tonight and the staff. One of the most important things that we do as a town is we do what I call planning. And part of our planning that we do for each year, a big part of it is our budget process. And today officially kicks off our budget process. We did have an open house last Thursday, and I have to tell you, with some of the public information we actually had triple the number of people who attended the very first, open house this year on the budget. We went from 2 to 6 people. So, and I guess if you counted the staff and other people, we might have had as many as 10 people there. So, but on a serious note, budget planning is something we do every year. It pretty much is a process that we go through. It basically outlines the council's priorities for the next fiscal year. And what we do here as part of our process is we start off with what's called the base budget. The base budget is the current year's budget. We take a look at that because that entails all of the core services of our town. And then if there's any adjustments that the staff wants to make, reductions, there's no issue there. If they want to do any enhancements, new programs, new services, then what we do is we go through what's called a supplemental process. And in your books, and I know these are really big, and I apologize, I've already heard from more than one council member about maybe trying to reorganize this so it's a little bit easier for you guys to get through. But if you look at the front of the book, there's a green sheet, and that's what the supplement is. So all the supplements, I believe they total approximately $1.3 million. We went through a fine-tooth comb reviewing that, and all the different requests that we had from the department. So you had ongoing requests and also one time. And as part of the criteria we use is there a dedicated revenue source to pay for the new program or service? Is the budget request one time or ongoing? And does the supplement address issues involving operational efficiency, safety, a council priority, or is it a strategic plan priority? With that, that's what we started off with. We started doing the budget roughly about 4 months ago. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Craig Ladolfi, our finance director. He and his staff have spent numerous hours trying to put this together. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Craig, who will then go into the preliminary presentation.
Mayor and council members, welcome. I'm glad to see that you're so excited about hearing budget information again. We're focusing this time on fiscal year 17-18, the next upcoming fiscal year. Our mission statement has been, I believe it was adopted by council, but I'm not sure what year it was done. And this is our mission statement. Along with our mission statement, we have our vision statement. And then we also have our values statement. The mission, vision, and values are what the budget is based upon, and we repeat the mission, vision, and values in most of our documents that we publish for either the financial statements or the budget reports. Get into our forecast. This is the 5-year forecast. This is what was presented to you earlier. For 18 through 22, we're showing graphically our revenues and expenditures, but just for the general fund here. For our revenues, We can see an increase, which to the layperson may indicate that we're doing well, revenues are increasing. But if you look at our expenditures, they're going up higher. So once again, here's our revenues compared to our expenditures. This is the portion of our state shared revenues. And as you can see, it's pretty much flat. And as we have pointed out previously, state shared revenues are distributed based on population primarily. Right now, Fountain Hills is about 0.4% of the total state population. So 0.4% of any total is not a big number. And as the big number keeps growing, our number is going to be smaller. This is what we're projecting for local sales tax. Once again, an increase, but unfortunately, in my opinion, not sufficient to keep up with rising expenditures. This is our estimate for HERF. This came from the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. The last time they used it was 2016, going through the fiscal year 2015. They have not made an update to that, so I don't have any more current information. But from our perspective, this is how we are projecting for the HERF revenues. Question was raised earlier, what are our budget assumptions? These are our assumptions. We added 1 FTE, which consists of 2 half-time FTEs in development services. As we said earlier, the MCSO increase is really a 2.6% decrease. Rural Metro went up by 3%. We're working in current dollars, so I did not include any inflation factor. Development services projected 96 building permits this year, no election costs, and the $377,000 is the portion of the general fund that is used to repay the debt on the community center. That debt will be paid off in year 2020. For our outstanding debt, this is what our debt will be at the end of this fiscal year, $8 million, slightly over $8 million. All of the town debt being paid by 2020. In 2021, Eagle Mountain will finally be paid off. For our budget overview, the proposed budget is $34 million, and it excludes transfers. An article in the Times had the budget at $38 million. The Times had included the transfers as part of that total. Since transfers are really moving money around without actually expending it, I believe it's more meaningful to show the actual expenditures. Here's how we compare to previous fiscal year budgets. Once again, in narrative, these are our assumptions. Understand the projections are just that, projections. My crystal ball sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. League of Cities and Towns has projected a modest increase in state shared revenues. We have included building permit activity for Darrow Canyon, Fire Rock, and Copper Ridge. And the town manager is recommending a 2.5% cost of living adjustment for full-time and part-time employees. In addition, I indicated no inflation for this year, but 3.5% for each subsequent year. As you saw in the previous slide, there is payments that the general fund will have to make to pay for the community center. We need to be aware of the state-imposed expenditure limitation and the public safety contracts. You can see 2.6% decrease for MCSO and a 3% increase for Rural Metro. They're still talking about changes to construction sales tax. Obviously, we don't know what that's going to be, so my projections are based on current legislation. And I did not include any projections assuming development of the state trust land within the next 5 years. So our highlights, we're focusing on our core services. There were 10 new positions that were requested. And as I mentioned earlier, 2 of those 10, each being an half-time person, and the 2.5% increase in salaries is just $79,000. For the departmental funding, as the town manager mentioned, there was 1.8 million in requests for supplemental budgets. And we accepted and approved 1.6 million. Here is, the breakdown below is where the supplements were approved in the various departments. Those are detailed in your budget book on those green sheets.
And Craig, just for their clarification, there were some dedicated revenue sources
Absolutely.
that covered these. So I think roughly, was it 1.3 million were covered by? So while that seems like a huge number, in terms of real dollars, what the net impact is not as high as it appears.
Yes, 1.3 million were covered by existing or revenue stream.
Madam Mayor, so the delta is the 1.6, 1.598 less the 1.3.
Correct.
Thank you.
And even of that number was like 200 and some odd, was it 243 or something like that, was ongoing. So it was not a very significant on an ongoing basis, because we had a lot of one-time types of purchases and things of that sort.
285,000 and change is ongoing. Public safety, a total increase of 93,000. The net of MCSO and rural metro. We did not anticipate any increases for electrical costs, nor for any water costs. No rate increases that we built into the budget.
Mayor,
Vice Mayor?
Craig, they weren't built in, but have we heard anything about what's likely to happen?
I have not. Our capital improvement projects, this is a listing of them totaling just over $7 million by major category. As you can see, Fire Station number 2 and Adero Canyon are by far the big ticket items.
Mayor?
Vice Mayor?
The downtown lighting improvements, can you explain what we're talking about there?
I'd be happy to step in, Greg. You recall we had the meeting, we were talking about the capital improvement program for next year, and we had some variations, we had some combinations of projects. This, my understanding, was to do both the wrapping of the trees and also fix the issues that we're having with the electrical on the avenue. But this should take care of that.
As I've indicated a couple of times in the past, even though I was a big proponent of the lighting of the trees, I have trouble with this item. I think given our situation and our widening gap between income and expenses, this is the wrong message to send to to our citizens.
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Yates?
Grady, remind me again what we spend annually with just the lighting of these trees on the holiday season. Isn't it at or around $25,000?
I don't recall, how much is it, Mark? Over 25,000. We were not able to find out from the vendor because there was a question as to, okay, what is the percentage or how much of that is including the wrapping of the trees? Did we ever get that figured out, Mark, from the vendor? They didn't have that broken out in their cost for us, so we don't really know what that number is, because there could be savings from that as well.
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, my point being that this is a 4, maybe 5-year payback, and then 25,000 plus savings thereafter, and it accomplishes multiple goals set forth by not just the strategic plan, but managing money. Thank you, Mark.
Mayor? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Councilman Tolos?
Thank you. Back when we had the meeting going over the CIP, I was on the phone, so I was not here present, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought we had put the Fountain Hills Boulevard widening and shoulder paving, I thought we had passed on that for the 2017-18 budget, and I see it here back on this list, that's $650,000. Is that, can you clarify? I mean, I had thought we had removed that.
Councilman Tolis, the $100,000 for the widening is a design concept study to actually determine a final cost. And the shoulder paving is a grant with Maricopa County, and if we don't spend it this year, we will lose it. So I believe for those two reasons,
So, Mayor, if it's a grant,
I think the split is.
why would that be in, why, if it's a grant, just help me understand.
It's a
If it's
60,
a grant and it's, why would that be an expense?
the 60-40 split, so it's about 245 for the town and 255 from the grant. So we were just showing these because we have to budget for the full expenditure, even though we're being reimbursed for part of it from the grant.
Each of these have like different revenue sources. It's a good question that you have, Councilmember Tullis. So as an example, the Darrow Canyon Trailhead is getting like roughly $1.8 million just from the development fees. And then the fire station is getting quite a significant amount of money. No? Okay.
It's a
That was a
small
bad
amount.
example on the fire station, but Darrow was a good one.
Absolutely.
But all these that we have, typically, there's different sources and uses of funds, and so we have to account for the full project costs in the capital improvement program, but then we go into and we break it down into exactly what are the sources and uses of the funds to pay for these. So that's why it shows up here. And again, to your point, we're not necessarily doing the widening of Fountain Hills Boulevard, but we need to do a concept report to just, basically this tells us what it will ultimately cost before we would ever consider doing this project. And we believe that Fountain Hills widening will be something that we'll need to do as part of the state trust land development.
So Grady, maybe so that this would be more understandable to residents also, if we could just get a total figured out, not tonight, but to let us know what the total is that the town actually is responsible for as a separate column, just so that residents don't think we're spending actually $7 million. We could do that?
Well, we are, I mean, the town is expending $7 million.
Right, but I mean, just to separate out what
The
is.
town's sources of funds?
What is grant and what
Okay.
isn't, just so they know that this isn't, this, how much of
Sure,
that is
we'll
grant.
go ahead and do that, but
I
in
could
the
see
end,
where, I know, I just could see where it could be confusing too.
I'm just looking at this and I'm seeing it's going to be less the $100,000, I think, really. I'm sorry, less the 60% of 550, but we'll go ahead and do that. We'll just show you what that is.
Okay,
Mayor?
Vice Mayor.
Previously, when we discussed the CIP projects, we eliminated, I think, 2 or 3 of them because council agreed that they would be nice to have but weren't necessary. And I understand there's some payback for the lights over time. But I'd have a hard time explaining to the citizens why we were going ahead with something like that when we have significant budgetary problems. I have no problems with any of the other things on the list, but, and I hate to say this, because I was one of the first ones to say we ought to do something about lighting up the avenue and renting.
These are Allen's trees we're lighting.
I hope they're not Allen's lights, not now, maybe in the future, but
And
anyway.
remember, we're doing it under dark skies too, so.
I understand, anyway,
Yeah.
that's,
Well, to the Vice Mayor's point, if you remember right at that meeting that we had on the capital improvement program, the council directed myself and staff that before we move forward on any of these, you want us to come back to verify that you want to still proceed with these. So if the council has a change of heart on any of these, we're already committed to the fire station at Darrow. But on everything else, if you have a change of heart, then you have that opportunity at another time.
All right, thanks for restating that.
Sure.
Mayor and council, that information on how much the town is actually spending is in the budget book. It's on page 347, and it's roughly $4.5 million.
Okay. I just thought this would be easier for the residents to know and for Bob to write down. Thank you. Just have two quick questions. So
Madam Mayor, I'm
you
sorry.
still left it,
What was that split again?
4.5 million?
Of the 7 million,
Correct,
4.5
yes.
is grant funding?
No, is town
Is
funded.
town.
It's town funding. All right, thank you, Mayor. Sorry.
2.5 is,
Nice.
Other,
you still added in the 10% for MCSO. You're still adding in 10% increase, right?
For
Future years.
fiscal 17-18, no, it was a
No.
2.6 decrease.
No, but after that, you're still figuring 10%.
It
I know
was
we-
10, but based on our meeting a week ago, I have revised that number downward to be 5%.
Okay,
yeah, we're going to do a 5% cumulative on MCSO.
okay.
And then, once we get better information from both the state pension plan and from MCSO, then we'll be able to have a better idea of really what the net impact is going to be on pensions with MCSO's cost to the town.
And my other question is about sales tax revenue. I remember Councilman Tolis had brought up an increase in population, which we're anticipating with the developments. Is that in any way considered in the revenue for future years or not?
Not for, if I can just jump in, not for this purpose that we're doing here, but we are planning on having a workshop to come back to Councilmember Tullis's questions about our assumptions used and to make some adjustments based on his request. So we're
Okay.
planning, I believe, in June, just doing nothing but looking at the 10-year projection that's been revised.
Okay,
And then the question of revenue options will be in the fall.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that his questions were answered. Okay, great. Go on.
So now we're going back from CIP back to our operating budget. And here it is broken down by category. Essentially the same as current year, a 1.1% increase. And then this is the same number broken down for just the general fund by department. The delta, the changes from last year to this year, totaling $931,000, is broken down by this detail. So if you take out the first four items, the other changes collectively amount to $60,000. Here's a breakout by our core services. And then a question that's always asked is how, after we spend this money, what do our fund balances look like at the end of the year? So this is where we would stand at the end of the year with our fund balances, essentially reserves, but most of these reserves are restricted and cannot be spent for purposes other than what they were collected for.
Vice Mayor?
Craig, did I understand you earlier to say that you assumed no inflation increase in these numbers?
For fiscal 17-18, correct?
And what's that based on? Ouija board?
Yes.
I was going to ask you if you think it's wise. Well, obviously you do. I'm just a little concerned that we have, okay, let's just hope for the best.
We have, when we budget, I mean, we're conservative, so we budget always for a little bit over than, what we anticipate it's going to be. So what Craig is saying, we have not budgeted more next year, but in the current year, it's, it's a little bit more than what we're actually going to expend, so we should be okay next year.
So something to note on this slide, our capital projects will be down to $3 million. But our HERF will have 1.6 million that we could use for improvements in the following year. I believe that slide is out of order, my apologies. So here are the funds that the town budgets for. There's 21 of them. Be more than happy to explain any one of the 21 if somebody would be so inclined.
We used to have this conversation, I remember when former town manager Kim Buchanan was here, and these used to be referred to different, we had 21 different books, and I just I could not handle, it sounded like we were doing something very much on the slide, but we have 21 different funds, and as Craig has indicated, these all have restrictions, and they're all audited, and we're all above board clearly on these, so.
Mayor,
Councilor Tolis?
would you clarify what the downtown strategy fund is?
That the fund was established many years ago at council direction to provide for improvements to the downtown area. And I believe it is not more specific than that.
And it's an excise on the sales tax, right?
It is funded by 20% of the 0.1% of the sales tax.
And, Mayor, and when you say these are restricted funds that can only be used for a specific purpose, give me an example of what a specific purpose of the downtown strategy fund would be.
When I use the term restricted, there's different levels of restriction. There are legal restrictions. Downtown strategy does not fall into a legal restriction. Debt service would be a legal restriction. So all the property taxes we collect for debt service can only be spent on debt service. Same for development fees. They can only be spent for the projects for which they were collected. There are several other funds, downtown strategy, as well as the environmental fund that council has specifically said we want to set this money aside to spend for these purposes. If council chooses to change their mind, they can.
Anything else? So we could use that fund for the lights around the trees, for example?
That's what we had planned to use it for.
Okay. All right.
There's about $1 million balance in that fund.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So, when we get back to the CIP funds, and you're allocating $100,000 for downtown lighting improvements, am I wrong to say that it's kind of like a double down, that if we have $1 million in the downtown fund, and then we're also allocating $100,000 in CIP, that really it's $200,000 available after the fact? Am I missing something?
The way we put the CIP projects together, as was pointed out, we have multiple funding sources. So the expenditure will be made out of the capital improvement fund, but money from the downtown strategy will be transferred to the capital improvement fund. We're not double counting it. We're moving it from the downtown strategy to CIP and spending it out of CIP. If you remember my opening comment, we're not including transfers as part of our expenditures because we're just moving money around. This is one of the examples. We're moving it from one fund to another fund and spending it out of the second fund. So it really is only $100,000. It is not $200,000.
Okay. Thank
Clear
you.
as mud?
No, yeah. So let me just ask you then to address anything else in the CIP that would be a potential transfer from a separate fund that we already have set up, essentially meaning that when we look at our expenses and we look at our revenues, that we already have an account established that has the funds in them.
Correct.
So is there anything else in the CIP that's highlighted here for the 7 million that is going to be transferred from some other fund we already have?
There is a good, without looking at the actual items, there are multiple items in that list that are funded or will be funded from other funds.
So to Craig's point, he said 2.5 million of the 7 million were from the various different funds.
I thought that was from, excuse me, Mayor, I thought that was from grants.
Yeah.
Well, that's, grants are also one of these funds that are listed here.
But to Councilman Tolis and Vice Mayor's point, 4.5 million, of that 4.5 million, how much are strategy funds or specific funds versus,
All of the 4.5 million will be CIP funds. Some of the 2.5 million will be grants as well as transfers from other funds.
okay.
Mayor, if I may, I think if council looked at page 347, they'd have their answer, the answer to their question. It's basically has the 5-year plan for all of the capital projects and all of the funding sources listed there. So that will make it clearer than mud.
So the discussion about using the 100,000 for the lighting, that's from the Downtown Strategy Fund, correct? So anything that comes out of that fund can only be used for the downtown anyway, so it can't help us in other areas if we don't spend it on the lighting.
That is correct unless council changes their mind and directs staff to do something other than keep it for downtown improvements.
Okay. Does that help any?
Yeah, I think, I have a question. All right.
You have a question?
I understand what Councilman Leger is saying about in the budget, page 345. I just think for transparency purposes, in presentation, might want to footnote or put an asterisk next to, for example, the list of CIP projects and indicate where the funding would actually come from.
I think the book says that for each of the projects, what the sources and uses of the funds are.
I think what Vice Mayor is saying
He's
that.
saying in the presentation, for presentation purposes.
For the purpose of the citizens that are going to be looking at what's highlighted here, it's going to be hard for them to understand that, because they don't have the book that we have, so.
We will make some modifications to this presentation when we do the next presentation for the preliminary budget adoption, so that that's clear.
If I could, that slide was meant to give an overview. Later in this presentation, we will list all the CIP projects and we will show their funding sources. But it's 3 or 4 pages long and it's not an easy summary to look at. So, just so that you know.
Okay.
Any other questions on the funds? This is our 5-year projection, showing a cumulative shortfall of 3.7 million at the end of the 5 years. Here's what we're projecting for our pavement management program that essentially is using HERF dollars, some of which has been transferred from the capital projects fund. This is a historical perspective, once again, of just the general fund, of our revenues and expenditures. Obviously, the projections are starting in 17, 18, going forward. And just to give you some perspective, here's how the town compares to other local municipalities as the general fund operating cost per 1,000 citizens. Fountain Hills is the blue part.
Whoa, Queen Creek beat us out this time, huh?
Looks like they did.
They're cooking the books.
And then this is something that we did, employees per 1,000 citizens. Same communities as were on the previous slide.
Whoa.
One note to add,
Queen Creek did.
most of these other municipalities have either utility districts, utility services, or public safety services as employees. So
Oh,
I did not include those in our number. Our number is just our FTEs.
But when you go to the previous slide, we still look very well as far as just the operating cost per thousand citizens. We're still like on the low end.
Mayor?
so is the operating fund, the operating slide before that, is that also taking into account that some of these cities have their own services, like fire, police? Is that all added into that? Or-
No, this is just what our budget is compared to what their budget is. So their budgets would include personnel costs for public safety and utilities.
But ours here also includes the contract costs.
Okay.
So we are covering, at least, that's why I said this slide is a better indicator, because this slide does include our overall budget.
That's what I needed to know. Vice Mayor?
In isolation, I think these two slides are very positive. But I don't think we can treat them in isolation, because while we are spending less than almost any other municipality in operating costs per thousand citizens, we're also running a shortfall. And so I don't think you can look at it just in isolation. I think we have to look at the whole picture. And the picture is not a good one. And I think we have to admit that and not gloss it over and say, oh, this looks very good. It was only 63 cents or whatever it is, $63 per citizen, and the lowest number of employees per thousand citizens. Again, in isolation, that'd be great if we didn't have a shortfall. But those numbers are going to get, could even get smaller than they are on these slides. And if they get smaller, it means more shortfall. And so I think we have to be very clear about what this really shows.
Councilman Tolos?
I would just say this, I think these slides, while they're interesting, it doesn't really give us anything that is, that we can take to the bank and say, you know what, we're doing a great job, or we're not doing a great job. Fountain Hills, compared to these other communities, is a totally different community. I mean, you look at Gilbert, Scottsdale, Tempe, these are enormous cities compared to Fountain Hills. Enormous. I mean, it's so, I don't think it's fair. If you look at Fountain Hills compared to other communities, like communities that have the population that goes up and down as we do based on the season, there's so many factors, very, very difficult to analyze this and bring anything out of it that's relevant, in my opinion. Nice information, but I don't think it necessarily gives us anything of value.
Councilman Yates?
Contradictory. I feel we could cross-reference this with quality of life as the other aspect to bring in. This is extremely important because the amount of city services that we do provide, shortfall or not, quality of life, apples to apples, this is incredible. This, you can't, I just think of this in business terms, to operate this type of organization for $34 million is incredible. To provide the quality of life that we do, so no, I respectfully, and we're probably all saying the same thing. I think this is a very good one. It may be good to factor in maybe what our shortfall might be and to see where we lay, but I think this is still pertinent information. It's good for the discussion. You can use this to cross-reference it with quality of life and what the services we provide for the value. I think it's very relevant. I just don't want us to lose this.
It is to the sense of it's information that's interesting, but I see this, I'm looking at these charts, and I'm getting the sense that we're almost being told that, you know what, you're inadequate in regards to these other communities that have much more staffing, much more investment in the staffing that's required. And while I totally agree with you that we provide incredible services to this community, and I think we're being fiscally very conservative, and I think we're doing an amazing job. But I'm taking this, and I'm sitting back and I'm thinking to myself, are we being shown these slides to say that we're not doing enough? And I'm feeling like we're getting, that's the message. And I want to make sure that it's equal in regards to what we're really looking at. That's my point.
Yeah, I will agree with you to the extent that it would be interesting to see a comparison of us and some cities that have the same population as we do. And we do that when we're looking at other services. We do contact, when we were doing studies on attorneys and we were doing studies on judges, we were looking at, what do towns our size pay for something like that for, let's say, when we were doing a judge's contract and whether we wanted a full-time or a part-time. So, I can see what you're saying because they have enormous infrastructure. They have lots of employees. We were at an event today where it was Grady and I were at a table and, was it Chandler?
Chandler had a whole.
Chandler had a whole table of manager, assistant manager, then assistant to that one, and then somebody else they had the entire table was staff. And their mayor wasn't there, but it was just a whole table of staff, but it was just the two of us, so.
Right.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying.
Well, Mayor and Council, good discussion. I think, just first of all, this has been something that historically I think has been part of the budget presentations for like the last 10 years. I'll tell you also, having been in other cities, they all do the same thing. They like to show and see, where they are in the pack. So that's all this is. And I think, like Councilmember Tullis said, it's not really much more than it's interesting. It may not be really telling a true story of especially when you compare it to such large cities.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go ahead and move on.
Yeah.
Can I just add something real fast, Mayor?
Sure.
So I was looking at it through a totally different lens, more through, I was identifying how efficient our town runs, and I see it more through, I'm like, first of all, what's going on in Casa Grande? I mean, it's that they can have, that they're spending so much and have that much staff. I know it's a pass-through town, but I see it as we're very efficient and we are providing tremendous quality of life and service to our citizens at a very budget rate. And I think this is important to note as we look around at the staff in the room. We compete for staff against these communities. And our spend and what we think is important in our community is important to note as staff moves around to Paradise Valley or they come here, they take note of these things. So I couldn't imagine leaving something like this out. It just depends on the lens you're looking at it through.
And my comment would be, we have a version of this that has other cities comparable in size. However, the criticism in the past has been they're not in the valley, they're not comparable because they're a rural community, they're not a bedroom community, they're not like Fountain Hills. So I can easily present some comparable cities and towns, just chose not to do it this time.
I think that would be interesting to see. Thank you.
Here's where our money comes from for our general fund. As you can see, local taxes, 55%, and intergovernmental, 33%. So 88% of our revenues are from those sources. We have very little that we generate from other activities that we engage in. Our org charts, this is the town. Nothing should surprise anyone on this slide. And now we'll start talking about the individual departments within the town. First up is public safety. We'll start with fire. There's 3.8 million, up 4.5%. Increase of 168,000. We have simplified the reporting, so there's now just fire administration and an operations organization, units within fire. And here's how those break down.
If I may, Mayor,
Yes, Vice Mayor.
what's the methodology behind a 4.5% increase when we're in discussions with them,
There is 3% for the rural metro contract,
right?
and then there are other costs. We have costs with Maricopa County Animal Control. We have the crisis response team. We didn't have, the CARE program in the prior fiscal year. We started it up again this year, and we're planning on bumping that up a little bit for the following year.
Or it's a 3% for rural metro, basically.
Correct. This is law enforcement, MCSO. $3.8 million, a decrease of 1.9 because of those other factors that I mentioned, Maricopa County Animal Control. We also pay for detention services, as well as the posse. Number of beats has remained the same at 3.8. And here's the breakdown for law enforcement. Court, here's our court. Increase of 18,000, and we're continuing the teen court program. And here's the detail on the court. 3.63 FTEs. General government is the new department we created this fiscal year to capture the costs that are unique and town-wide. So we just have one organization in that. We're calling it non-departmental. And the bulk of that proposed budget is in the contingency fund. I won't say fund, contingency account. Here's what we pay for out of the general government. Administration is our next one, an org chart of the administration. Totaling 2.3 million, up 11.9%. At the bottom is a breakdown by the various divisions within administration. And here is a chart with the detail of administration. 12.46 FTEs. Economic development, here is their strategic plan goal. ED went up by 186,000. The bulk of that being a marketing agency assistant expenditure for 50,000.
Mayor,
Vice Mayor.
I really hesitate to ask this question with the young lady sitting next to me, but why is the town clerk reduced 14.6%?
Essentially because of the elections cost. We had the elections cost in this fiscal year, and next year we are not budgeting for any election costs.
Okay, thanks.
That's the whole office.
She makes what?
She needs paper.
Staples.
Development services is next. Here's the layout for development services. Up 940,000, 1%.
Councilman Tolis.
Let's back up a little bit.
Back
I have
up.
a question in regards to the economic development.
Back to economic development. Okay?
Can you clarify the marketing agency assistance? What exactly that is? I
Yep.
mean, self-explanatory, I suppose, with what you've written, but help me understand.
I think it will have Scott just come up and address that.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Councilmember Tullis, that is a retail recruitment strategy. It's an annual fee, $50,000 for the first year. If it's something that, it's typically done on a 3-year contract, but when I've been talking to them, and obviously because of our budgetary concerns and issues, that we could do that on an annual basis of addressing it every year, and each subsequent year in the 3 years goes down. I think it's $40,000 and then $35,000 for the second and third year, but the first year would be $50,000. And it is for, just that, it's for retail recruitment strategies to help assist me in filling our 300,000 vacant square feet of commercial space in Fountain Hills.
Did you want to
Anything
explain a
else?
little bit about the firm, as you've explained to me in the past, and what their strengths are, and why you're interested in this as an extension of your office?
Yeah, well, I had, this was a supplemental request, and there was a second one in there for additional staff. This is more cost-effective than additional staffing. Additional staff was around $62,000, $63,000 for just a business analyst, essentially, or a specialist or an assistant. This is a company, there's a couple that we're looking at, but the one that I'm favoring is 26, I would essentially have an extension of staff in our economic development staff of 26 commercial real estate professionals and site selectors who would be essentially an extension of our economic development team. They would be all throughout the country. They have contacts with 9,000 retailers in the U.S. For me to contact, essentially, it's unfathomable for me to get through that kind of a time. Now, I can, in enough time, get through some of those, but by the time I do, the data gets old, it's no longer relevant, and this team of 26 or so individuals will really be on the forefront, and it allows us to leverage their connections on a timely and efficient manner.
Anything else?
I just want to say, for the record, I am 110% behind you. And I look at the budget, and you look at $50,000, it's nothing, okay? But all of these agents that are out there to promote commercial real estate, like for Shea Connolly, for instance, to fill that vacancy, I have heard from Bart Shea and from others, third party, that we have more demand for this commercial space than we know what, we can rent it over 2 times over, okay? And I hear these comments like that, and then I see a marketing agency assistance budget, and I think to myself, why would we be budgeting money to go out to a third party to help us promote this town? I personally would rather give you a raise. I mean, really. I mean, that's kind of where my head's at. And I think to myself, they're all on the multiple listing service. They're all on the commercial listing service. We all can have access to that. So for what we have with the Target Plaza, with the Bashas' Plaza, with the Safeway Plaza, which is full, if this marketing agency assistant is a multi-year contract, this isn't just 1 year. This is really a close to $200,000 contract that we're initiating right now. Is that right?
No, it's just an annual. Right now, it would just be $50,000 reviewable at the end of that year. If we decide to renew, it would be at I think $40,000 for year 2. And again, if we continue it at the end of year 2, I think it's $35,000 for year 3. So it would be
Councilman Leger.
$125,000 total for
Councilman
3 years.
Leger?
So
Councilman Leger?
Thank you, Mayor. Scott, what's our current vacancy rate in commercial?
300,000 square feet, mid 30%, 35, 36%, which is astronomically scary.
How does that compare to other communities, although I know it's not apples to
30%.
I'll, I'll try. I'll try and go a little bit apples to apples with Carefree, Cave Creek. Has similar layouts and demographics. They're both in the upper 20s. I think Carefree, or Cave Creek, I think is actually in the 30s, 31, 32, and Carefree is a little bit lower in the high 20s on retail. Both of them.
Question for you, and maybe I can be assisted by Councilman Yates when I'm done talking about this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we had an agreement with a brokerage firm. Was that in place when you came here?
It was actually was put in place just before I had arrived, maybe a year or so prior, and it was with NAI Global.
So how does that strategy compare with this strategy? Because I know the success rate was about 0%.
Well, that's what we paid.
We got one deal. Fountini's, they turned that over once.
I stand corrected, 5%. But just give me a sense for that, because I know that was a very creative idea that was brought to council. We gave it a shot, and I just want to know how this is different than that. I mean, you say 0, but these folks were working on commission. You would think there'd be an incentive. That was the idea. So why did that fail, and why would this be successful? Is this broader? Is it more sophisticated in terms of the network? Help me out with that.
Councilmember Leger, in my experience, in my conversations with that group in my first year here, was essentially told that there was not much else they could do. They were to reply, I think if I remember reading the contract, they were supposed to be quarterly reports from them and involved in feedback, and it never materialized. And I really think we got what we paid for there. I think with the group of, we've got money or something in the game, they've got something in the game to produce to keep us on for possibility of years 2 and years 3. Like I said, they've got an experienced team, a proven record, 26 individuals that will be working as an extension of Fountain Hills Economic Development Team, representing us throughout the country at various national retail shows, and again, direct contact with decision makers of 9,000 retailers. It's just it's a greater force than I have.
Mayor, I just have one follow-up, please. Do you have any data that indicates their success in terms of examples of clients that they've worked for and what they've been able to do for these clients in terms of filling vacant commercial space?
I do. I have spoke with a couple of colleagues throughout the country in doing the research. There's several large companies that do this and try and narrow that down when each one is claiming to be the greatest in their field. So I did talk to a few people that I know, including a good colleague and a contact in Dubuque, Iowa, who has utilized a couple different ones and is currently with the one that I've kind of in favoring of, and had nothing but great things to say. They've had a tremendous amount of success in their downtown region, in their redevelopment regions for retail, and attracting new targeted retails that their economic development team, community, and council had set forth to attract. I've spoken to a few people in Texas, as well as some of the southeast states, Tennessee. But I have tried to do as much homework as I can to reach out to as many who have used multiples or just individuals to see how well they perform.
Where's their corporate?
They are in Texas.
They're in Texas. And you did go to Iowa State?
I did go to Iowa State.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
All right, Councilman Yates?
Art was next.
Okay, Councilman
Well,
Thomas.
like I prefaced the conversation, I am 110% behind you. I think you've done an amazing job since I've known you, and with all the outreach that you've done. If money was no object, what else do you need? What else do you need to be successful in economic development and recruiting businesses to this community? what else would you need? Just share, in your opinion, what would you need?
Well, I think, aside from additional staff, a full economic development department, which I understand where we are and what's going on in our budget, those would be, if money were no object, those would be great to have a couple additional team members. One to do data mining and research, to do the digging on the retail and job-focused companies for growth would be key. Available land, an industrial park, a commerce park, anything along those lines, to where we had a dedicated space for employment growth would be tremendous. Councilmember Yates certainly knows, as he sits on the GPEC board, that most of the projects that they see and that I see that come through are all looking for 20 is a small project, 30, 50, 100,000 square feet. Now, those are larger employers at 500 plus, and that's not a perfect fit for Fountain Hills. I understand that. But there's a lot of technology companies and small companies that come through. They're still looking for 20, 30, 40, 50,000 Class A space. That would be nice if we had space to build shovel-ready sites and do those immediately.
Just to follow up on my conversation with you, the state trust land and our desire to develop that is going to create density, that's going to create more people, traffic, which will help with you in economic development and recruiting businesses to this community. Is there anything in your budget, or is there a crossover? Where in your budget, or is it in a different department's budget, are we allocating funds for you to help in that regard and that goal?
I'll answer that quickly. I'll tell you what, Councilmember Tallis, when it's all said and done, what I have available in my budget for marketing and expense is about $12,000 to $15,000 total annually. I think, as you know, certainly in anybody's line of work, when you market towards anything and you expense anything on advertising or anything, that's gone quick, very fast. There's not much in there for me to utilize for that. I know that's a conversation, and you're right in all those facets of what developing that with more density will bring to this community. Population, for one. It'll get us closer and closer to the magical 50,000 number in a trade area, which so many retailers are looking for. And we're close now, but we are just a few thousand short here and there. And all those things are true, and all those things in practice, or in theory, certainly happen to a community. So the timeline on that and how soon we can get that done is going to be key and important in our future development, economic development-wise, and certainly economically for the community.
Councilman Yates?
Along the same line of discussion, I too asked Scott the same thing. What do you really need? Having worked with ED departments all over the valley, yeah, we're a department of one. Mesa's probably the biggest, has managers and assistant directors. Scottsdale, Tempe, that are almost order takers. They could just sit at the desk and wait for businesses to come in, and then they respond to them. But spending $50,000, and I appreciate, and that was Scott's answer, it's a better utilization of money. Councilman DePorter had the same thing, but a face-to-face person, if that delta is 12 grand or 15,000 to actually get you somebody, what would be more effective? I hear you, this firm out of Texas can contact up to 9,000 people, but as you know, the deals are relationship-based. I had a meeting with the ED folks in Tolleson last week, and great guy, I don't know if you know Jason, phenomenal, and he came out of Parks and Rec, and he's like, you know what I learned? And he's an engineering background. He's like, you got to have the face-to-face discussion, the personal relationships. That's economic development. That's probably 90% of it.
Can I just tag on yours?
Tag away.
Tag.
As a former, Councilmember Yates, as a former staffer of economic development for the city of Scottsdale, I worked my tail off there.
Well, there's a lot of orders to fill.
I was just going to say, I mean, that's my thought too. You're the expert in the area, and if you feel like you're going to be able to hold them accountable. I mean, we've all had plenty of experience with consultants, right? There's something real special about the person who sits in the office next to you that kind of sweats when you walk past a little bit. They're a teammate, right? They have more skin in the game. They're here every day. So for me, I mean, it seems that these agencies do have widespread breadth, so it's something that oftentimes you couldn't touch on. But I'm with Cecil. My first thought was, I mean, I'd rather give you a body that you can leverage 40 hours a week to do the research and be out there, because so much is relationships and following up on those targets that you're interested in. So that's my thought.
And Councilmember DePorter, I don't disagree. I saw this as an immediacy, as an immediate an attack, if you will, on our vacancies, and a short-term turnaround could be kicked, could be started for $50,000 and really get us rolling. And if it rolls into year 2, that's still a short time frame. A staff person, there's a ramp-up time, there's the hiring, there's the moving forward, there's the getting them up to speed, there's the training. You're looking at quite possibly and quite likely an introductory position, maybe somebody with a few years staff, a few years ED experience, and that can still be done in time. I just was looking at this as an immediate impact.
Councilman Yates?
If I may, back to the challenges of having 30% vacancy, 35%, and we've all heard me talk about functional and economic obsolescence. We got a great product in the town, but we don't have the facilities. The reason Park Place is doing so well, you're downtown, front and center, brand new penny, and even having said that, the Shea Corridor with the Target Center, they're still pricey. They're still responding to the market. So I'm back to, would you be upset if we increased that budget and gave you an assistant? Are you saying that this is, hands down, this is a better way to go? Because gearing this up, and back to Councilman Tolas's point about, okay, but next year, fine, we're getting a deal at $40,000. What's the most effective? Because I'd rather find you $15,000 more dollars, get a person, let's ramp it up, let's do it right. We do have some things coming down the road, but hands down, man, we're so, this is almost a sales department, you know that. And in order to be on that short list of the new companies coming in, and as a region, we're doing great. I just want to be on the short list, and you can only be on so many places at once. So the question is, what is the most cost-effective way to do it? Understanding the dynamics of Fountain Hills, why we're so vacant because of our obsolescence in some of the properties, et cetera.
Well, Councilmember Yates, that either way, I'm managing the consultants. They work for me. A staff member would be just another management in a similar vein, more focused, more skin in the game. They're here, they're an employee, and focused on what we're trying to do. And to isolate them, especially if we could do that, I think of the City Surprise has a individual who that's all she does. She does the business analytics, she does the data mining, she does the digging, she comes up with the contacts. What do we need? How to get a hold of them? Who are they? That's her sole job, and that's not a sexy ED job by any means. It's a very sales hardcore position, and but what a benefit. And to be able to have the right tools and the amount of money to find a good person, I think would be, in the long term, a tremendous benefit.
Vice Mayor.
Well, clearly, we have to leverage whatever money we have to our best advantage. And I guess I'm hard-pressed to see how one additional person can compete with a team of people who have contacts all over the country, especially if that person ends up doing analytics and so on. And while I'm skeptical, I trust Scott's judgment on this and would be willing to try it out for a year. But I do have a question. I'd like to have something clarified. Councilman Tallis mentioned all of the retail outlets that are inquiring about Park Place. Are we talking about retail, or are we talking about businesses, expansion, entrepreneurial development? Because that was confusing to me when we tried the other one, where, I don't know what we call it, the program, where a group of people were going to go out and try to recruit something, retail or business, for Fountain Hills and get compensated based upon their success rate. But that was never clear to me either, because some of the stuff we heard about was retail. So I guess what I'm asking is, what is the charge to this group? Specifically, what is the charge to this group? What are they going after?
Councilmember Magazine, it is retail focused. And that would be, the primary goal would be for retail recruitment.
Can you define that, please?
Yeah, that would be fast casual, it would be sporting goods, it would be goods and services, or goods essentially. It would be furniture and household items, things along those lines. I mean, they would be stores.
And that's really counter.
Alan, bring your mic down.
I'm sorry. That's really counter to what the council talked about a year and a half, 2 years ago, which was we need to go after the kinds of businesses that you've been bringing in that hire people and employ people and so on. So this is really different from what we talked about before. What's your thinking on this?
Well, my thinking is it doesn't change what I do at all. I'm still out there, still working for the job, is what you're talking about, is these high-wage jobs, assisting companies that are business retention, companies like Brokers Alliance who are here, attracting new companies and new jobs and high-wage pay. That doesn't change. My focus would not change at all. This would simply be an arm, if you will, that would be focused on retail, that I would simply be managing. But my day-to-day operation would not change a bit.
Mayor, if I may.
Okay, let me just sum this up. We keep going around in circles. It seems like there's two discussions going on here. One is, yes, if Scott thinks that this is a good thing, then we should probably go with it. But on the other hand, if you had your choice, I think that's the question we should be asking you. If you had your choice to do this or get an assistant, what's your preference?
Right
That's
now.
the bottom line, right now, on the spot.
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure I could give a perfect answer on my feet right now. Yeah, there you go.
Humbly serve at the pleasure of the council.
Well, do you want to look into it and get back to us on it? Because it seems like everybody here is in agreement that you're the expert, and we want you to decide what's best for you. And now you hear that we're willing to go the way of the assistant if you say that personal interaction with people, the personal contact is better, or were you going with this just because you thought the other wasn't possible? So we give you these two options. Now, it's still similar in expense. Could you just come back after looking into it and decide what you would rather?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and my thought is, again, that like any recruitment strategy, whether it's retail or whether it's medical, healthcare, or whatever, these things take time, and I think to guarantee a one-year trial and expect immediate results is not realistic. I think that's why they do a 3-year program on these, and you need to build and continue to build. And what we've lacked historically is time under pressure, the consistency of time and the consistency of the message over a long period of time to build something. And to do this for a year and give up, I think, is dangerous and expensive. But there is a possibility that after a year's time that you don't see progress and you could lose out. If you have a staff member, you're building time and you are building something for the long haul. That's what I would really have to think about a little bit more.
Well, and,
Thank you for not
Answering your
the question.
well, Mayor, I mean, it's a good point, and I just want to let you know, Scott did have both in the budget. He had this, plus he had the position. in talking with him, he felt that he wasn't quite ready for the position. He thought that this would be a good transition towards that position once we have prospects that would come through and maybe fill some of this retail. But this is certainly a council policy discussion, and you guys can make that decision, because he did have both in the budget. And I didn't eliminate it, based on myself, in my opinion. I listened to what Scott had to say, and he really felt that this marketing of our retail would really give us a lot. We got a big problem here, and we're trying to solve it. And this other position that he's talking about is going to be a numbers cruncher, and would not really be necessarily, it would be able to help, but not necessarily do what he's trying to do with this contract with this firm. I don't know if that helped any, but.
No one's answering the question.
Right, I get it.
Maybe I should have Andrew ask. Andrew? Make them answer the question.
Didn't teach us in law school.
Is it different?
Well, I would just say this, I think it's not only our problem, but it's the corporations that are managing these large shopping plazas, that their rents are out of line with what is sustainable in Fountain Hills. And I think that we have to focus not necessarily so much on promoting new businesses to come to town, but it's also in retaining the businesses that are here. And in the retention business, it's relationships. And I would say, as Councilman Yates said, it's the relationships, and you're only one body, and you're one exceptional staff member in this town. And I support you 110%. This discussion is being is going on because we support you so much, and that we want you to be successful, and your success is our town's success. So I would want to see you have assistance, and I would want to see you have, if you feel this marketing agency assistance is the right thing to do, I'm not questioning that. Really, this conversation is, what do you need? What more do you need? And I think that if you were able to add a body and add someone that you can be out on the streets to network and to really ask these businesses, how can we help you as a town? How can we help you be successful? What can we do to help you? Their
Okay,
success
so-
is our success.
Okay, so I'm going to cut the discussion off, and you have two options. You don't have to, you want to study it a little more and get back to us. Of course, the third option is you can have both. If Grady can find the money to give you both, that would solve the problem, right? So why don't we go on with the budget, and you'll investigate, right?
Yes.
And
By the time we
with
come
the
back to the
answer?
preliminary budget adoption,
Yeah.
you'll have an answer.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Good. Craig, let's go on. I think it's somebody's birthday, right? We need to get home.
We were into development services. Estimating 3,000 building inspections, 725 code enforcement cases. Budget increase of $13,000. Broken down into these various divisions. 8.5 FTEs for development services.
Okay.
Public Works. Just a small increase, $7,000. Doing a lot of maintenance on washes, town-owned buildings, street sweeping, inspection of dams, as well as overseeing our capital improvement projects. Broken down into this way, 9.8 FTEs. Public Works includes the streets fund, but it is her funding. Still,
Can I stop you just for a second? So we have two custodians that work part-time, but we also have a contracted custodian?
correct.
What does the contracted one do?
Public Works Director will answer that.
Thank you.
Mayor and council members, the contract custodians work nights and on the weekends at the community center, and then town hall when needed, when we have vacation or sick time.
And how does that compare in cost to our part-timers?
I'd have to get with Raymond and look at a complete breakdown. It's I believe it's a couple $100 a visit when they get called out.
Okay, I'm just thinking, you know, is it more fiscally, more fiscally, is it more fiscally responsible to maybe have another part-timer do weekends rather than hire an outside? Have you looked into that at all?
We've asked for additional staff before and have been turned down.
Well, that's like additional staff, but it'd be just somebody, if it's just for weekends.
Mayor, council, it's a good question. I don't see Raymond here, but I have heard that the company that we have used in the past under the contract, that they do a super job. And maybe it's just a matter of just increasing, you know, hours to them. But to your point, we have looked at both part-time staff and the contract is less than the part-time staff.
Oh, okay, that was my question. Is it less? Okay.
But we do find the combination is a very useful combination, because during the daytime, we have issues that pop up. You know, and then we also have George, who is a technician, and he pops in and can fill, like in town hall, while Mitch is out. So it does work out very well.
Okay, thank you.
Streets, we have 4 FTEs in streets, 390 lane miles, 68 acres of medians, and here are the expenditures out of the HERF fund. And this is broken down by the programs that we perform in streets. This is what Public Works Director is recommending for our pavement expenditures for the next fiscal year. Finishing Zone 1 and doing some more in the downtown streets. As you know, Zone 1 is by far the largest zone within the town. Community services looks like this. A decrease of 2.8%. And this is what they maintain: preserve, parks, dog park, handle all our recreational activities. Broken down by their divisions. Then we go back at our capital improvement plan. This is where I indicated, starting here, we've broken down where the sources are. So Fire Station 2, we're getting $150,000. Adero Canyon, 1.8 million. Plaza Fountainside, 20,000. The Fountain Hills Boulevard shoulder repaving, 255,000. Then part of the budget that you'll adopt is our fee schedule. So here I've highlighted in red the changes that are being made to the fee schedule. Most of these are kind of wording changes, very few actual increases in the fees themselves. As you can see, the new fee, the description change only, we're just highlighting those so that if somebody looks at last year's or this year, they know that there was a difference. These items are all in your budget manual, once again, and highlighted in red. The ping pong tables we are adding as a new fee.
Ping pong table?
Looking at our personnel, Here is our staffing over the years from fiscal 2002 through now. We're at 55 FTEs projected for fiscal 17-18. Total personnel costs, a little over $4 million, an increase of 4.6%. 2.5 of that is for the recommended cost of living increase. Total of 54.95 FTEs. 43 full-time, 27 part-time. Our association with the Arizona Metropolitan Trust has saved the town approximately $100,000 annually in medical costs. Once again, our total recommended is $34.3 million. And here's what we do. On May 4th, we adopt the resolution for the proposed budget. On June 1st, we come back and adopt the final budget. Along with the final budget, we adopt the fee schedules, the organization charts, the FTE schedule, the job description, the pay plans, as well as an implementation memo. Then on June 15th, we adopt the tax levy to fund those. And sorry to say, but that's all.
Oh, Vice Mayor, it's not over till it's over.
You know, we get this big book with all this information, and we listen to your presentation, and you answer questions, and it all seems so easy from our perspective, but I want to congratulate you and your staff. This is one hell of a lot of work. And I don't think we should underestimate how many hours you people put in to produce all of this. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll also mention that some of them come in on weekends to catch up. Craig does a lot.
Comes
And
with the position.
so does B, coming in on weekends. Councilman Leger?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a few questions, Craig. Back on a few slides, and you don't need to get back there. For pavement in downtown, I think it was $550,000 to redo that. Is that something that could come out of the Downtown Development Fund? Seeing that the balance is going to be about $1 million and we're really hurting on the pavement management side?
I believe it could.
Okay, thanks.
That's a policy question for the council.
Couple other items. I noticed in the tourism budget, there's an item for a visitor center for $30,000, which just kind of jumped off the page at me. Could someone address that? And this is kind of the first time I've heard much about this.
I'd be happy to, Councilmember Leger. So the staff and I have been working with the director of the chamber on a visitor center that would be located on the avenue. The chamber is looking at relocating to the Park Place project, development project. And so this would be a space that would be adjacent to their space, and it'd be operated with volunteers and staff from their office. And the $30,000 would be from the town to help fund that visitor center. We were already independently looking at spending the same equivalent money. Actually, it was going to cost more when we were looking at some other locations. We're in the process right now of negotiating an operating agreement to make sure that we have the fit to participate with them on this project. And so we believe that we'll be bringing that to you probably sometime in June. That will outline the expectations and operations of that center. But the idea is we want to use volunteers as we've been using, but right now the location in the current location of the chamber has not really been working very well.
Okay. Councilman
may.
Leger?
Will the chamber staff share responsibility in this visitor center?
Yes, they will. They will oversee the volunteers, and if we need to staff up with additional volunteers, we have talked to staff, and we'll see if we can get additional volunteers from Heather Ware, our volunteer coordinator.
What do you see as the strategic intent of us having a visitor center?
Well, I believe one thing that we want to do is we want to encourage people to spend their dollars here. So we want them while they're here to try to find places to eat and visit and stay. But we also want to offer convenience for them. And so I think that's one goal. The other goal is for us to basically have a presence. We have branded ourselves Experience Fountain Hills, and I think it's important for us to have a physical presence that fits with that. And this center will actually have our branding as it relates to Experience Fountain Hills. So it'll look like the town's brand, but it'll be operated by the chamber.
Councilman Tolis? Oh,
If
You
I
wanna
may,
finish?
just a quick one. So, you know, over the years, we've grown our tourism program. We've done a tremendous job. Staff has done a tremendous job. We started with $80,000, and our budget now is $250,000, and we're adding to that. And I don't have an issue with that as long as there's going to be an ROI. How would this overlap with all the work that Gracie's been doing, the upgrading on the websites and all the outreach that her and Rachel have been doing, which in essence is, it's not a visitor center, but it has the same intent. So I'm just kind of looking at value add rather than overlapping functions.
Well, I think that this is actually value added. One of the concerns I had when we were talking about this initially with the chamber is that they were wanting this to be member only, to be able to put their programs and brochures and such, and I said absolutely not, because we can't be that way. We have to be open to all different businesses that want to help promote their hospitality and tourism. So, but I believe that this fits in with our strategy, and this is also, you recall that we had a council reviewed the tourism strategic plan, and this was one of the items that was in that. So I think that this fits very nicely with the strategy for tourism, and we will be working on ways to try to come up with metrics where we can see like where people are coming from and see if we can gauge people spending money and how much they're spending money while they're here. That will be one aspect of this center as well, by surveying and trying to get information like that from people that are visiting it.
Okay, Councilman Tolis?
Thank you. You know, I had actually thought that $30,000 was allocated. I had the idea, the concept to have the space that's just behind this, that's never been fully utilized the way it was originally planned when this was designed, to have that be an economic development office that is storefront, and that you'd have signage out front that people would come in and be able to actually not come up to the second floor, and be much easier for Scott and his team to promote our community. Is that in the budget anywhere? Because I thought that's where the $30,000 was.
No, we had $100,000 that was in the budget that we talked about at the capital improvement program meeting. And that was one of the items that got eliminated, was $100,000 to, which was probably an overestimate of what that would cost, but we had that to fix this office area up for economic development. The nice thing with this is that this would be a lockdown facility, so it would be staffed by Chamber of Commerce, and then on weekends or if there's evenings, like an event going on, they could lock off their space, their office space from this visitor center, but during the daytime, Monday through Friday, they will have access and people can come into the office area of the chamber. So I think that there's that staffing element that you wouldn't necessarily have if it was over here. There wouldn't be the convenience for them. And we're looking for this to be a true partnership between the town and the chamber, and that's, I think, what our skin in the game is, the $30,000 on this.
And the only thing I'll add to that is that Rachel and Grace have been setting up Experience Fountain Hills Town Table at each of the events, and they've had a great success with their surveys and giving out material on the town, and but we just don't have that many events. So this is a way to always have access to everything that the town has to offer, and that's what people do in other towns. They come for one thing, and then they wander into a tourism office, and they pick up brochures, they pick up event calendars to see, maybe they'll come back, maybe they'll even live here after they see how much there is here. So they're just aren't enough events in town that they could be truly successful with the tourism program. That's why I think this will be great. And it's good to be shared with the chamber.
And this isn't just a budget item, so we will be coming back on an operating agreement that council will be approving as part of that.
Okay. Any other questions for Craig? No? Okay, do we have any major changes, Andrew, that we need a motion for or not? Okay, then.
Mayor, if I might, one thing that just has come up
You said you were
today.
finished.
I did. A question came up today is how we're budgeting for the possibility of utilizing third-party firms for a third-party inspection. Those dollars had not been included in the budget. It's essentially a pass-through. We're going to collect the fees and then pay them to a third party for inspection. So I anticipate that there will be a significant adjustment in both revenues and expenditures to account for that type of transaction.
Right, thank you. Councilman Yates?
And with all the discussion about economic development, I, for one, and it sounds like everyone here wants Scott fully staffed and to give him all the tools possible. Could we get an actual number and/or an alternative proposal on an analytics person and a business development person or whatever that type? Or if there's a phased approach, I'm not saying we'll do it, but let's see what that really is.
Well, Scott did that, so we'll make that available to you.
Okay, tremendous.
Okay, anything else? A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second? All in favor?